Nearly 270 years ago, the composer George Handel was down on his luck. Broke, dejected, he fled his adopted hometown of London and decided to try his fortunes in Dublin. He crossed the Irish Sea with the manuscript of an oratorio he wasn't quite sure about. He had written it in one manic burst of 24 days, during which he had hardly slept and would later claim to have seen visions. The unfinished piece was called Messiah. He was hoping it might rescue his career. He imagined it as a sort of opera, not a piece for a church, and to that end he had secured the services of a soprano called Susanna Sibber, who had been involved in a notorious sex scandal in London. With perhaps an eye on the box office as much as on the heavens, he thought she might draw a good crowd. The world premiere was held in April 1742 in a theatre in what is now Temple Bar, the profits going to charities for prisoners and the sick. And the rest, as they say, is history. I suspect that, like many parents, my most memorable Christmas was the one following the birth of our first child. We'd been living in London for some years, and that's where the lad was born, but when he was a few months old we returned to live in Dublin, arriving at the start of Christmas week. Thus I remember driving across England in that cold late December, the last of the 20th century, the last of a millennium, through fog and sleet and iced glazed scenery, the wipers relentlessly fighting the grists of hail and the crackle of the banjaxed radio. The car was older than our relationship, indeed practically on the scrap heap. My wife was in the back with a toaster on her lap, a portable telly beneath her feet, and her pockets full of spoons and forks, while into the Croc's boot had been packed the remainder of our worldly goods, total value about £9.50. It was the midnight sailing, and we rocked across the Irish Sea. It was a dreadful night, the worst crossing I've ever known. Through all of it, the little one slept soundly in a carry cot on the floor. Around us ranted the mobs of beer-fuelled emigres, roaring, carousing, slapping one another on the back, and trying to garrote one another with lengths of tinsel. Every time a massive wave hit the ship, we seemed to rise 100 feet in the air before crashing back down again with the implacable viciousness of a hanging judge's gavel, the gnash of glasses breaking, the moans of en masse vomiting. I couldn't believe the baby was so tolerant of the punk rock ambience. Here was a kid who could sleep through the fields of Athenry. Our dozall bill would always be low. By 6 in the morning the party had ended. I went out on the deck to get some air. Everything was calm. It was a cold, clear morning. I don't think I had ever seen a sky that had so many stars. You felt you could touch them, stir them around. There was an unearthliness about the beauty and the stillness. I walked the decks. People were gathered here and there. As I rounded the stern of the ship, there was an elderly couple who were sharing a flask of tea and listening to classical music on a radio. I don't know if I can convey to you the strange beauty of that scene, being that far out at sea, in the dark and the cold, with haunting music being played on a radio. I stood near them for a while. I think I was smoking, and what happened next I'll never forget. A piece of music they recognised came on, and I recognised it too. They turned it up a little and poured themselves another cup of tea. It was an extract from Handel's Messiah. The choir began to sing, and the old couple hummed along. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. Now, I should tell you that I'm not the kind of fella who easily cries, but when I heard those simple, beautiful words, it was hard to remember that. Dawn began to come on, the sky turned red and gold. The ship was by now approaching Dunleary, the town where I grew up. I could actually see the pier where my pals and I used to hang out on summer evenings, the steeples and the shopping centre, and Killiney Hill in the distance, its obelisk silhouetted against an impossibly scarlet dawn. I had a son. I was a father. I felt flooded with joy, as though everything in my life finally had meaning. This is the force of Handel's Messiah, that it touches our lives. It was like a Christmas present from fate. That's how I felt about it anyway. But in another way it was nothing at all, just a moment in a life. It was a radio on a ship a few days before Christmas, among drunks and dreamers in the darkness. A broken hallelujah, Leonard Cohen might have called it. But maybe that's the best kind of all.